G'day, my name is David and I love my gardening. Today I am preparing some beds. I've been preparing them actually for the last couple of days for planting onions. A variety of onions I'm going to be putting in, and one of the things I like is a weed-free garden. And a number of years ago I did a number of experiments using various methods of mulching and coverings to have a weed-free garden. And the thing that I fell in love with was garden weed matting. This stuff will it breathes, it allows air in to the garden, it lets the rain and moisture in, keeps moisture in, and it knocks my weeds down 95%. And I've had in my hair up until a couple of days ago. You can see what's left here of my summer crop, all my zucchinis, tomatoes, eggplant. I've pulled them out. I've gone through and removed a few weeds that were in there, pulled the plastic back, and then I've gone through and put in a combination of, we have chickens, we have a combination of their litter, their compost and manure, which you can see the remnants of the bedding for the chickens. So that goes straight into the garden bed with the chicken manure. We save it up, compost it down, and then we dig it through the garden bed. I then go through and put in I've got a slow release fertiliser that I use. That's I'm here in Australia, Melbourne. Bought it from Hoogie's, a Barmac slow release fertiliser called Prolific Blue. Prolific Brew. It's got a mixture, a nice mixture, broad mixture, which is great for vegetables. So I dig that through my garden bed, and then I go along at the end and whack through a bit of the old blood and bone. So I've dug all that through. I then went through with my watering can and made up some sea salt. So I'm really trying to get all the organisms in the soil firing. And I've irrigated that through a couple of days ago. We've had some rain the last couple of days. I've left the beds open, and I'm just coming through now and putting in the weed matting prior to putting my seeds in. Weed matting is great. It is just, I cannot endorse it enough. I bought this cheap, went on eBay, found a guy over in North Melbourne. They were just selling rolls and rolls and rolls. I've got a big roll over there. I think there was 100 metres, and it's 10 metres across, and it cost me $100. It was cheap as chips. And I just go through and cover my beds, and I have a special couple of tools, couple of little tricks that I've developed for cutting holes when I want to plant just individual plants. So this is great for tomatoes and zucchinis and eggplant, all individual plants. But then I cut slots for the crops I grow in rows. So this is great for onions, beetroot, any of those row kind of growing, spring onions, etc. Just cuts the weeds down. Weed management's it's fantastic. Onions don't like competition, they don't like weeds, they struggle. This is just a great way of saving my time and making it easier to manage the weeds. So I will show you how I cut these slots, because one of the things that you'll find quickly with weed matting is if you actually use a pair of scissors to cut the edges, like you can see here where these edges have been cut along when I've cut a strip off the roll, it frays and it goes everywhere. But in here it's not frayed, it's a nice clean cut. And I'll get my tools and show you how I do it. So you've cut your plastic to size, put it down. You want to get yourself some of these. They come in packs from Bunnings. I think the packs are 50 or 100. Don't get the cheapy thin gauge wire ones. They just rust. They'll last you maybe 1, maybe 2 seasons. Spend the extra $1.50 and get these bad boys. The other thing you can do is I've bought in the past heavy gauge wire and just bent it into little U-shaped brackets and then cut it with a pair of bolt cutters. And then you use these, just push it down, wiggle it through the weed matting, push it down, and that'll hold that in place. That won't move, the wind won't blow that out, and it won't come out. So step 1, cut it, stake it down. Make sure it goes all the way to the edges so you don't get weeds popping up around the edges. Step 2 to cutting these slits is you need a couple of metal star pickets. So I've got a couple of really long ones here. And what you do is you lay them down where you want to cut your slots. And so I cut a slot there. I'm going to go for a three slotter here. This is just over 1 metre wide here. The garden beds are all the same size, so it makes it easy. I can switch when I've actually cut a pattern. This was actually from a bed down the end there. Last year I grew pickling onions. I've used that weed matting and moved it up to this bed, and I'll rotate something else in there this winter, or I may spell it. So star pickets down. You have on star pickets there are 2 short sides and 1 long side. The long side you want facing inwards, and you roughly line it up where you want it to go, where you want to cut your row, and get it roughly the same. Get the distance out from the edge, so it's about the same. And then you want one of these tradey torches, trade flame, ultra gas. It'll be the best. I think I paid $60. You get some gas cylinders, some spare cylinders, and this will be the best $60 and quickest and easiest way to do this. So what you want to do in a controlled fashion, the metal here holds the plastic down against the soil so it doesn't catch fire and run through it. But what you want to do is a quick motion along the actual edge. Quick motion along the edge. So you're trying to just cut through that plastic. You're keeping it close to that metal edge. You don't want to hold it very long because you don't want the plastic to catch fire. You're just trying to cut through it as quickly as that and easily as that. Then on the other side, come back the other way. What this does is it cauterizes the edge of the plastic. It actually melts it together so you don't get that fraying of the weed matting. And when you get to the end, and then you can pull this back, and you've got one perfectly cut row. The edges won't fray, and away you go. One of the things I like to do with these, and I'll do this with this one now, is I'll show you on this one I've done over here already. So I've cut rows, and then I've actually made a gap in the middle here where I've not cut through the plastic, and this allows so the flaps don't flap around. Essentially, it holds the rows in place. So I do have some pin in here to hold these around, so the middle pieces don't flap around and it stays where it's meant to be. But this just helps break up a big sheet of the weed matting so that it doesn't blow all over the place. Maintains the rows where you want them to be. And now I'll do that with this piece here. Okay, let's do the last one together. Remember, you don't want this to catch fire. Just quick, short strokes. Follow the line of the steel. Hear that? That is blazing hot. Don't make the mistake of grabbing that like I did one time. You do it once, you won't do it twice. There we have 3 perfect rows ready for planting my winter onions and garlic. Now I'm just going to do this other half here. I'll show you the finished project. Couple of quick tips when you're cutting the weed matting for your garden bed. First of all, make sure you use a nice sharp pair of scissors. These are a pair I've taken from the wife's kitchen. She'll be most impressed when she sees this video, and that makes it a lot easier to cut the weed matting with less fraying of the edges. Second tip is when you do cut it, find something you can use as to mark a straight edge on it. Otherwise you end up with warpy bits of weed matting. So you get a nice straight edge. I use this as a guide. I use a big star picket. This is a 8-foot star picket. I lay that down over the plastic and then I cut along it as an edge. So that's tip number 2. Third tip, when you do measure your weed matting, make it wider than your garden bed. And what this allows you to do is you can get extra overhang on your garden edging, and you don't get weeds popping up along the sides. If there's a gap, the weeds will come up. There you go. Where there's a gap, a weed will come up. It'll find its spot. So go an extra couple of inches wider than your garden bed and give yourself plenty of overhang so you can go right up against the edges and suppress those weeds, keep those buggers out. Don't give them an inch. They're my tips when cutting the weed matting. There we go, all finished. Irrigation back in place. Nice and tidy, really easy to keep on top of the weeds. Amazingly simple, not much effort, certainly a lot less effort than having to come back the end of the season and pull out weeds or maintain the weeds during the season. Weed matting is particularly good for spring summer crops that like the soil warm. So your eggplants, zucchini, corn won't germinate normally unless you get the soil temperature up 21 degrees Celsius and above. It's the best germinating temps for corn here where I am anyway. And yeah, weed management, this is a breeze. I travel a lot, and I don't have a lot of time to be sitting around pulling weeds out. I need to be enjoying my garden, not weeding my garden. We'll be putting in 4 varieties of onions in here. We've got a pickling onion, a brown onion, a sweet onion, and some other onion, can't remember, as well as some white Australian garlic. But too good. You got to get on this. Highly recommend it. Definitely a way to go.